The cold water shocked my system as I watched them fall. Expensive suits and designer dresses now soaked in creek mud, their screams echoing through my property. The bridge that had been illegally built across my land collapsed beneath their weight, sending the entire HOA board tumbling into the shallow water below. Their champagne glasses shattered against rocks, the celebration turning to chaos in seconds. Martha Kellerman, our power-hungry HOA president, emerged from the water like a swamp creature, mascara streaming down her face, her white pantsuit now stained beyond repair. Her eyes locked with mine, filled with fury and humiliation. I stood firm on my property line, engineer's report clutched in my hand. I had warned them repeatedly about the structural flaws. I had begged them to stop building on my land. I had filed every legal document possible, but they never listened. They never cared. They thought their money and connections made them untouchable, but nature does not care about wealth or influence. Physics does not bend to social status. As Martha struggled to maintain her dignity while knee-deep in muddy water, I realized something profound. Sometimes justice arrives not through courtrooms or lawyers, but through the simple, unavoidable laws of gravity. My slice of heaven measured exactly 4 acres, with a crystal-clear creek cutting through the back portion of the property like a silver ribbon. The water babbled over smooth stones, creating a natural soundtrack that had first made me fall in love with this place 15 years ago. Back then, I had scraped together every penny from my savings account to make the down payment. It was worth every sacrifice. The massive oak trees that lined the creek had been planted by my grandfather decades before I was born. He had owned this entire valley once, before parcels were sold off one by one. My portion remained in the family, passed down with explicit instructions to preserve the natural beauty of the waterway. The creek served as more than just a pretty feature. It marked a clear boundary between my property and what used to be unclaimed woodland beyond. I spent countless weekend mornings sitting beside that creek, coffee in hand, watching deer come to drink at dawn. Cardinals and blue jays performed aerial ballet between branches. Fish darted between submerged rocks. This was my sanctuary, my retreat from the noise and chaos of the working week. My neighbors had always been respectful of property lines. Old Mr. Johnson to the east would wave from his garden but never venture onto my land without invitation. The Petersons to the west occasionally borrowed tools, but always asked permission first. We existed in that perfect balance of friendly but respectful distance that made country living so appealing. That all changed when the Henderson Development Group purchased the woodland across the creek. Within months, bulldozers had cleared the trees. Concrete foundations appeared like a rash across the landscape. Roads were carved through what had once been deer paths. 96 cookie-cutter houses sprouted from the earth, each one indistinguishable from the next. The first indication of trouble came in the form of a glossy postcard in my mailbox. Creekside Estates Homeowners Association welcomes you to our community meeting. I remember laughing at the presumption. My property predated their development by generations. I had no obligation to their association. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I attended their first meeting in the newly constructed community center. The room buzzed with the excited energy of new homeowners, all discussing property values and community standards. I sat quietly in the back, observing the dynamics at play. Martha Kellerman stood at the podium, her platinum blonde hair styled in an immaculate bob, diamond earrings catching the fluorescent light. As your elected HOA president, I promise to maintain the highest standards for our community. Our proximity to natural features like the creek will make Creekside Estates the most desirable address in the county. Her gaze drifted toward me, the outsider in worn jeans among their business casual attire. Something in her expression made my stomach tighten. It was the look of someone who saw my creek not as a natural wonder to be preserved, but as an amenity to be exploited. After the meeting, Martha approached me with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "We are so pleased you could join us. Your property is such a lovely feature adjacent to our community." "My property is not a feature of your community," I replied politely but firmly. "The creek marks my boundary line according to deeds dating back 50 years. Her smile remained fixed, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. Of course. But surely you understand that shared natural resources benefit everyone. We should discuss access rights sometime." I drove home unsettled, the words access rights echoing in my mind. Looking back, I should have recognized that moment as the calm before the storm, the last peaceful days I would enjoy on my property. The water in my creek continued to flow, unaware that it had become the focus of unwanted attention and bureaucratic greed. The first violation of my property boundaries occurred on a Tuesday morning. I was working from home when movement near the creek caught my attention. Two men in khaki uniforms were placing small flags along my side of the waterway, consulting clipboards and measuring devices with official-looking concentration. I marched across my lawn toward them, maintaining a calm I did not feel. "Excuse me, gentlemen, this is private property. May I ask what you are doing?" The taller man looked up, squinting against the morning sun. "County survey, sir. Just confirming boundaries for the new development records." "The boundary is the creek," I stated firmly, "and you did not request permission to access my property." The men exchanged glances. The shorter one shrugged apologetically. "We were told this area was part of the Creekside Estates assessment. If there is a discrepancy, you will need to take it up with the development office." They left without removing their flags, which I noticed were planted several feet inside my property line, effectively claiming a 3-foot strip of my land along the entire creek. I pulled each flag and placed them in a neat pile at the very edge of the creek bank, directly on the boundary line. The following week, I discovered new survey stakes placed even further onto my property than the flags had been. Someone had moved the markers overnight, silently claiming more of my land with each adjustment. This time, I documented everything with photographs, capturing the encroachment from multiple angles. At the next HOA meeting, which I attended uninvited, I raised the issue during the public comment period. "Surveyors have been moving boundary markers onto my property without permission. This needs to stop immediately." Martha Kellerman adjusted her designer glasses, regarding me with practiced sympathy that contained no actual compassion. "We appreciate your concerns, but our community planning committee has reviewed historical documents suggesting the creek access has been shared for decades." "That is completely false," I responded, my voice steady despite my rising anger. "I have the original deed and property survey from when my grandfather purchased this land in 1958. The creek is entirely on my property." Martha smiled thinly. "Perhaps you would like to share those documents with our legal team. We are simply trying to establish community access points to natural features that enhance our neighborhood value." That evening, I composed a formal letter asserting my property rights, attached copies of my deed and survey maps, and sent it certified mail to the HOA office. 2 weeks passed with no response. The letter was returned unopened, marked insufficient address despite being correctly addressed. More concerning than the HOA's tactics was the changing attitude of my neighbors. People who had once waved cordially now averted their eyes when we crossed paths in town. I overheard whispers at the local hardware store. That is the one blocking the creek access. Selfish, thinking he owns a natural resource. Martha worked efficiently to turn public opinion against me. At the following HOA meeting, which I monitored via their public live stream, she presented artistic renderings of a community nature walk, featuring a wooden footbridge spanning my creek. This beautiful addition will allow our residents to enjoy morning walks through natural areas while connecting both sides of our community, she announced to enthusiastic applause. Not once did she mention that the bridge would be built on private property without the owner's consent. The formal notice arrived in my mailbox on a Friday afternoon. Notice of Community Improvement Project and Easement Claim. Inside was a detailed description of their planned footbridge, complete with construction timeline beginning the following month. They cited obscure county bylaws about recreational easements and historic community access. What infuriated me most was finding preliminary architectural plans for the bridge accidentally included in the envelope. The detailed drawings showed a structure spanning my creek at its widest point, with support pylons driving deep into my creek bed. The plans were marked approved in bold red letters, with Martha's flamboyant signature at the bottom. This was no clerical error. The plans were included deliberately, a power move designed to intimidate me with the apparent inevitability of their project. They wanted me to believe that decisions had already been made, approvals already granted. They expected me to surrender without a fight. That night, I spread all the documents across my kitchen table, my grandfather's original property deed beside Martha's fraudulent claims. This was no longer about boundary disputes or community access. This was a calculated attempt to seize what was rightfully mine. The battle lines had been drawn, and I would not back down. Monday morning found me in the wood-paneled waiting room of Wilson and Associates, the most reputable property law firm in the county. My palms sweated as I clutched my folder of documents. The consultation fee alone had required dipping into my emergency savings. I could not afford a prolonged legal battle, but I could not afford to lose my property either. Jeffrey Wilson, a gray-haired attorney with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed my documents with growing concern. They are attempting to establish adverse possession, he explained, pointing to specific language in the HOA notices. By claiming historical access and then establishing physical presence on your land, they can eventually petition for legal rights to that portion of your property. But that is ridiculous, I protested. My family has owned this land for generations. There has never been public access across the creek. He nodded grimly. The law requires adverse possession claims to be open, notorious, and continuous for a statutory period. They are laying groundwork to claim the creek crossing has been used by the community for years. The legal retainer depleted my savings account significantly. Each letter Jeffrey drafted cost more than I earned in 2 days of work. Meanwhile, the harassment from the HOA intensified. Daily notices appeared in my mailbox claiming violations of community standards, violations that should not apply to my non-member property. Improper lawn maintenance, $50 fine. Unapproved fence height, $75 fine. Failure to submit exterior paint color for approval, $100 fine. The absurdity would have been laughable if not for the mounting financial pressure. Each fine came with threatening language about property liens and legal action if left unpaid. I forwarded each notice to Jeffrey, who added them to our growing file of harassment evidence. The social isolation grew increasingly difficult to bear. Neighbors who once stopped to chat now hurried past with averted eyes. The local coffee shop fell silent when I entered. Someone left an anonymous note on my windshield at the grocery store. "Stop being selfish. The creek belongs to everyone." My only comfort came from long evenings spent in the county records office, poring over historical property maps and water rights documents. The archivist, an elderly woman who remembered my grandfather, helped me locate the original survey markers establishing the creek as entirely within our property boundaries. "Your grandfather was particular about documenting everything," she told me, sliding a faded folder across the desk. Inside were photographs from the 1960s showing the creek and the property stakes, along with notarized statements about the boundary lines. Armed with this historical evidence, I requested a meeting with the HOA board. 7 people sat behind a long table in the community center, Martha Kellerman center stage like a queen holding court. I presented my findings methodically, showing the historical photographs and documentation proving my ownership claims. Martha leafed through the documents with manicured fingers, her expression bored. When I finished my presentation, she passed the folder to a board member without comment. "Thank you for your input," she said dismissively. "Our legal team will review these materials, but our community improvement plans will proceed on schedule. The bridge will benefit everyone, including you. Building on my property without permission is trespassing," I stated firmly. "Any construction would be illegal." Martha smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. "Documents can be interpreted many ways. Our experts have determined the creek represents a natural easement. Construction begins next week." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You cannot do that. I have not granted permission." "Permission has been granted by the proper authorities," she replied smoothly. "This meeting is adjourned." The following morning, I awoke to the sound of vehicles pulling up to my property line. Through my kitchen window, I watched workers in hard hats unloading equipment near the creek bank. I rushed outside in my bathrobe, phone already dialing the sheriff's department. A supervisor approached, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, sir. We are just doing preliminary site assessments for the community bridge project." "This is private property," I stated, trying to keep my voice steady. "You do not have permission to be here." He looked genuinely confused. "We have all the necessary permits, signed by Commissioner Davis himself." He showed me the documents, and my heart sank at the official county seal. When the sheriff's deputy arrived, he reviewed the permits with a frown. "These appear to be in order," he said reluctantly. "It is a civil matter at this point." As the workers began marking areas for excavation, Martha's luxury SUV pulled up to the property edge. She emerged in an expensive pantsuit, designer sunglasses masking her eyes. She approached me with confident steps. "The county commissioner is my brother-in-law," she whispered, standing close enough that only I could hear. "Your approval is not required. This bridge will be built, and there is nothing you can do to stop it." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing helpless on my own property, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. In that moment, I understood the true meaning of powerlessness in the face of corruption and connections. The metallic screech of heavy machinery tore through the morning silence, jolting me awake before my alarm. Sunlight barely filtered through the trees as I rushed to my window, coffee forgotten. A yellow excavator lumbered across my property line, its metal claw already tearing into the soft earth near my creek bank. Men in construction vests swarmed around the area, measuring tools in hand, marking trees with bright orange spray paint. Several ancient willows trees that had stood sentinel over the creek for decades had already been marked for removal. My hands trembled as I dialed Jeffrey Wilson's number. "They are on my property right now," I explained, watching helplessly as the excavator uprooted a small tree. They have heavy equipment. They are destroying everything. Document everything, Jeffrey instructed calmly. Photos, video, notes with timestamps. I will file an emergency injunction today, but these things take time. Time was the one thing my creek did not have. By midday, the excavator had carved a deep wound into the bank, creating a flat staging area for bridge construction. The displaced soil, rich, dark earth that had nurtured wildlife for generations, was piled haphazardly, some already washing into the creek with each small rainfall. When I approached the work site with my phone camera recording, the foreman intercepted me. "Sir, you need to stay back for safety reasons." "This is my property," I stated firmly, continuing to record the devastation. "You are trespassing and causing environmental damage," he sighed, clearly having been prepared for this confrontation. "Look, I am just doing my job. We have all the permits right here." He gestured to a weather-protected document case hanging from the equipment. "County approved, environmentally assessed, everything by the book." I examined the permits, my heart sinking further with each page. Commissioner Davis's signature appeared on every document, each one dated and stamped with remarkable efficiency. Environmental impact statements that should have taken months to process had apparently been approved overnight. That evening, I drove to the county clerk's office, determined to understand how such permits could have been issued without my knowledge or consent. The clerk, a tired-looking woman with sympathetic eyes, spoke in hushed tones. "Those permits were processed through the Commissioner's Special Projects Fast Track," she admitted, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. "Not standard procedure for private property crossings." Armed with this information, I spent sleepless nights researching county building codes and environmental protection laws. The bridge construction violated multiple regulations: inadequate environmental impact studies, improper watershed protection measures, and most critically, insufficient structural specifications for the intended use. Each morning, I photographed new violations from a safe distance. The concrete footings they poured directly into the creek bed destroyed a protected salamander habitat. The construction runoff clouded the once clear water. The support beams being installed were visibly thinner than required by code for a public access structure. I filed complaints with every regulatory agency I could find: the County Building Department, the State Environmental Protection Office, the Watershed Management Authority. Each response came with suspicious similarity. All investigations delayed until after project completion due to staffing limitations. After 2 weeks of construction, the bridge began taking shape, a wooden structure spanning my creek, connecting HOA common areas while cutting directly through my property. The design showcased decorative railings and built-in benches, creating a gathering place rather than a simple crossing. Martha visited the site daily, directing changes and adjustments like a film director orchestrating a scene. When she spotted me documenting from my property line, she approached with her practiced smile. "It looks wonderful, does it not? Your creek will finally be appreciated by the entire community." "That bridge does not meet safety codes," I replied evenly. "The port structure is inadequate for public gatherings." She laughed, dismissing my concern with a wave of her manicured hand. "Our engineers know what they are doing. Perhaps you should focus on accepting progress rather than fighting it." That evening, reviewing my photographs on my computer, I noticed critical details I had missed in person. The concrete footings showed hairline cracks already forming. The load-bearing beams sagged slightly under their own weight. The connection points between vertical and horizontal supports used fewer bolts than the standard required. Curiosity drove me to request the bridge plans through a public records request. 3 days and a processing fee later, I received the official blueprints. Comparing them to photographs of the actual construction revealed alarming discrepancies. The built bridge used smaller support beams than specified. The foundation depth was half what the plans required. The construction crew had cut corners everywhere possible, likely to reduce costs. Most concerning was the load capacity calculation. The plans claimed the bridge could support 50 people simultaneously, approximately 9,000 pounds. But my amateur calculations, based on the materials actually used, suggested the true capacity was less than half that amount. The bridge was not just an invasion of my property rights. It was a dangerous structure, a catastrophe waiting to happen. And as I studied the inauguration plans posted on the HOA website, showing images of champagne receptions and ribbon cuttings with dozens of people gathered on the span, I realized exactly how dangerous it truly was. The structural engineer arrived at precisely 9 o'clock Monday morning. Michael Chen had come highly recommended by Jeffrey for his expertise in failure analysis and his willingness to testify in court when necessary. I led him to the creek, maintaining a respectful distance from the ongoing construction. Michael said little as he observed the bridge, his expression growing increasingly concerned. He took measurements, photographs, and samples of materials, occasionally shaking his head. After an hour of meticulous examination, we returned to my kitchen table where I had spread out the official plans. "This structure has serious deficiencies," he stated, pointing to specific areas on the blueprint. "The actual construction deviates significantly from these specifications. The support piers are insufficient for the span length. The lateral bracing is inadequate. The connection points lack proper reinforcement." His official report, delivered 2 days later, used technical language that translated to one unmistakable conclusion: the bridge was dangerous. Terms like catastrophic failure risk and imminent structural collapse potential appeared throughout the document, accompanied by calculations showing the bridge could support barely 40% of its claimed capacity. At maximum load, which appears to be planned for the opening ceremony, failure is not a possibility but a probability, Michael explained during our follow-up call. This bridge should not be used until major structural reinforcements are implemented. Armed with this professional assessment, I submitted urgent safety complaints to every regulatory body with jurisdiction. I attached Michael's report, photographs, and my own documentation of the construction process. I requested immediate inspections and a stop work order until safety concerns could be addressed. The responses arrived with suspicious similarity, all investigations delayed until after the grand opening. One candid building inspector called me unofficially. "Look, my hands are tied on this one," he admitted. "Orders from above. But between us, that report you submitted raises serious concerns. If I were you, I would stay far away from that bridge when people start gathering on it." My attempts to warn individual HOA board members proved equally futile. Emails went unanswered. Phone calls were directed to voicemail. The construction continued at an accelerated pace, workers now laboring under floodlights to complete the project ahead of schedule. Martha's influence cast long shadows across the county government. Her brother-in-law's position as commissioner created a protective barrier around the project, shielding it from the normal inspection process. The corruption was as obvious as it was untouchable. The glossy invitation arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday. "Join us in celebrating our community bridge," it proclaimed in elegant script. The date, just 4 days away, was circled in gold foil. Martha's signature flourished at the bottom, alongside a personal note. We hope you will join us in embracing this wonderful community edition. I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sunset reflect off the creek water. The bridge loomed like an unwelcome guest, its wooden planks gleaming with fresh sealant. Construction debris still littered my creek bank. Plastic wrappers and discarded work, gloves floated against rocks where trout had once darted. A profound moral dilemma settled heavily on my shoulders. Should I make one final, desperate attempt to warn everyone about the danger? Should I physically block access on the day of the ceremony? Or should I simply document what was about to occur, letting nature and physics deliver the lesson that my words could not? I envisioned Martha and the board members gathering on that bridge, champagne flutes in hand, celebrating their victory over my property rights. I imagined the creaking of overloaded beams, the splintering of inadequate supports. No scenario ended without damage to property, to reputations, potentially to human bodies. The responsible course of action seemed clear. I should station myself at the bridge entrance on Inauguration Day, Michael's report in hand, physically preventing anyone from stepping onto the dangerous structure. But experience had taught me that such actions would likely end with me in handcuffs, labeled a disturbed troublemaker while the ceremony continued unabated. The next morning, I called Jeffrey for legal advice. If I know a structure is dangerous and people use it anyway, am I liable? I asked. Not if you have documented your warnings, he assured me. You have gone above and beyond reasonable efforts to alert authorities. Your liability is minimal at this point. With that assurance, I made my decision. I would make one final, documented warning attempt at the ceremony itself. I would position cameras to record both my warning and any potential consequences. I would not physically intervene, not because I wished harm on anyone, but because sometimes only direct experience can penetrate willful ignorance. That night, I checked the weather forecast for the ceremony date. Clear skies, mild temperatures, perfect conditions for an outdoor gathering. Perfect conditions for documenting whatever might unfold. I set up 3 weatherproof cameras at different angles, each with clear views of the bridge, each recording to cloud storage that could not be deleted or confiscated. Nature abhors poorly engineered structures as much as it abhors vacuums. Some decisions make themselves when arrogance meets physics. I would simply ensure there was a record of the inevitable collision between human hubris and natural law. Dawn broke clear and crisp on Inauguration Day. Golden light filtered through autumn leaves, casting dappled shadows across my property. From my kitchen window, I watched caterers arriving at the far side of the creek, setting up white-clothed tables and arranging champagne flutes in precise rows. A string quartet unpacked instruments near the bridge entrance. 2 photographers tested light angles and backgrounds for the perfect publicity shots. I dressed carefully in my most professional attire, charcoal slacks, pressed white shirt, navy blazer. I placed Michael Chen's engineering report in a leather portfolio, along with copies of my numerous safety complaints and their dismissive responses. My final certified letter, highlighting the specific structural deficiencies in urgent yellow marker, sat in my outgoing mail. One last attempt at prevention, documented for whatever investigation might follow. At 11:30, I checked each camera, confirming proper angles and battery levels. The first one captured the entire bridge span from upstream. The second focused on the main gathering area near the entrance. The third provided a wide-angle view of the entire scene, including my property line and the creek below. All feeds streamed directly to secure cloud storage. By noon, vehicles lined the newly paved HOA access road. Board members arrived in luxury cars, the women in colorful dresses and heels ill-suited for outdoor terrain, the men in business casual attire projecting casual affluence. Martha appeared last, her white Tesla purring to a stop in the reserved space nearest the bridge. She emerged resplendent in designer white, a matching hat shading her perfectly made-up face. Every movement calculated for the photographers who fluttered around her like moths to flame. I approached the gathering from my side of the creek, portfolio in hand. Conversations hushed as people noticed my arrival. A security guard, a new addition I had not anticipated, moved to intercept me at the property line. "Sir, this is a private event," he stated firmly, hand raised to block my path. "I am aware," I replied calmly. "I am the owner of this property where half of your bridge is built. I need to speak with Mrs. Kellerman about an urgent safety matter." Martha noticed the commotion and approached, her practiced smile firmly in place. "How nice of you to join our celebration after all," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Perhaps this means you have finally embraced our community vision." "I have come to deliver a final safety warning," I stated, opening my portfolio to reveal Michael C. Henn's report. "This bridge has critical structural deficiencies. It cannot safely support large gatherings. Your own plans call for 50 people on this span. The engineering analysis confirms it may collapse under such weight." Martha's smile never faltered, but her eyes hardened. "Always the dramatic one, are you not? Our engineers have certified this structure as completely safe." "May I see that certification?" I asked, "because I have a professional assessment stating otherwise." She ignored my question, turning to address the growing crowd of onlookers. "Our neighbor is simply unhappy about progress. The bridge has passed all necessary inspections." This was a blatant lie. No official inspector had ever visited the site. I held up Michael's report so others could see. This structure was built with substandard materials. The support piers are half the required depth. The lateral bracing is insufficient. Please, for your own safety, do not gather on this bridge today. A board member I recognized as Thomas Wilkins stepped forward. "Is this another delay tactic? We have all the proper approvals." "This is not about approvals," I insisted. "This is about basic physics and safety. Too much weight will cause this structure to fail." Martha signaled to the security guard, who moved closer to me. "I think you have said quite enough. This is our celebration day, and we will not let you spoil it with unfounded accusations." I locked eyes with her. "I have documented every warning, every safety concern, and every violation. What happens next is on your conscience, not mine." She dismissed me with a wave, turning back to her adoring audience. "Let us proceed with our ceremony. The ribbon cutting will begin momentarily." I retreated to my property line, making sure to remain in full view of my cameras. The ceremony began at noon sharp, Martha positioning herself before a large red ribbon stretched across the bridge entrance. Board members flanked her on either side, their expressions triumphant. "This bridge represents our community spirit," Martha proclaimed, scissors gleaming in the sunlight. "A connection between people and nature, between different areas of our neighborhood, a symbol of progress and unity." The ribbon parted with a flourish. Applause erupted from the gathered crowd. Martha led the procession onto the wooden planks, the entire 7-member board following closely behind. Guests streamed after them, champagne flutes distributed by servers at the entrance. 20 people crowded the narrow span within minutes, then 30. Wine glasses clinked as Martha prepared to offer a toast from the center of the bridge. I watched in horrified fascination, unable to look away. The first ominous creak silenced conversation momentarily. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd, just settling sounds. Martha announced with authority she did not possess. New wood always speaks a little. The second creak came louder, followed by a subtle shift underfoot. I saw several guests glance down uncertainly. The string quartet, positioned at the entrance, hesitated in their playing. Then came the sound no engineer could mistake, splintering wood and groaning metal in catastrophic surrender to physics and gravity. The collapse happened in terrible slow motion. First the center sagging visibly, the wooden planks bowing under concentrated weight. Then the entire structure twisting like wet cardboard as one support pier leaned drunkenly sideways. Screams replaced celebration. Champagne flutes flew from startled hands. Martha's white outfit became a beacon in the center of chaos as the bridge surrendered completely, dumping its human cargo into the shallow creek below. The water was barely 4 feet deep at its center, enough to break the fall but not enough to cause drowning. Board members scrambled through knee-deep water, designer clothes soaked, dignity abandoned in the rush to solid ground. Martha stood frozen in shock, water streaming from her once immaculate outfit, makeup creating dark raccoon circles around her eyes. I stood silently at my property line, engineering reports still in hand, cameras capturing every second of the catastrophe. The bridge that had been built without permission on my land had collapsed exactly as predicted, taking with it the arrogance and assumptions of those who had dismissed my warnings. Water streamed from Martha's designer outfit as she struggled up the muddy creek bank, her white pantsuit now stained beyond salvation. The other board members fared no better. Soaked documents, ruined electronics, and shattered dignity scattered across my property. The string quartet had wisely remained on solid ground, their music replaced by the sounds of splashing and muttered curses. I approached the edge of the collapse, careful to maintain stable footing on my property line. "Is everyone all right?" I called out, genuinely concerned despite everything. "Does anyone need medical attention?" Several dazed people looked in my direction, but no one appeared seriously injured. The shallow creek had provided a wet landing but prevented major trauma. Pride had suffered the most significant damage. Martha spotted me standing there, her eyes narrowing in fury. She slogged through the water toward me, finger pointed accusingly. "You did this," she shrieked, mascara creating dark trails down her cheeks. "You sabotaged our bridge." I remained calm, holding up Michael Chen's report. "I warned you about the structural deficiencies. I filed complaints with every relevant authority. I told you personally this morning that the bridge could not support large gatherings." A small crowd gathered around us, dripping and distraught. Thomas Wilkins, the HOA treasurer, pushed forward. "Is that true, Martha? Did he warn us about structural problems?" Before she could respond, the rumble of vehicles approaching caught everyone's attention. County trucks pulled up, inspectors, environmental officers, and remarkably, the same officials who had delayed investigating my complaints. Behind them came 2 local news vans, reporters already preparing cameras and microphones. A county building inspector approached, taking in the collapsed bridge with practiced eyes. "What happened here?" he asked, though the evidence was plainly visible. "The bridge collapsed during their inauguration ceremony," I explained, handing him Michael's report. "This structure was built without proper engineering oversight, using substandard materials. I filed multiple safety complaints, but investigations were postponed until after today's event." The inspector flipped through the report, his expression growing increasingly grave. "These calculations are correct. This structure was never adequate for public gatherings." Martha attempted to regain control of the narrative. We had all the proper permits, she insisted, though her authoritative tone was somewhat undermined by her bedraggled appearance. Permits obtained through improper channels do not ensure structural integrity, the inspector replied coolly, and they certainly do not overrule basic engineering principles or property rights. Environmental officers were already taking water samples and photographs of the damage to the creek bed. One officer crouched near a concrete support that had cracked apart, revealing inadequate depth and poor quality materials. The news crews captured everything: the collapsed bridge, the muddy board members, the environmental damage now fully exposed. A reporter approached me, microphone extended. "Sir, we understand this bridge was built on your property. Can you tell us what happened?" I explained the situation calmly, sticking to documented facts. The homeowners association built this bridge on my property without permission. When I raised safety concerns, they were ignored. Multiple warnings about structural deficiencies were dismissed. The results speak for themselves. As the afternoon progressed, the full extent of the situation unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck. County officials discovered multiple violations in the construction process. The permits, though officially signed, had bypassed standard safety reviews. Environmental regulations had been flagrantly ignored. The construction company admitted they had been pressured to cut corners to meet an artificial deadline imposed by the HOA board. The fines came first, violations numbering in the dozens. Each carried substantial penalties that the HOA insurance would need to cover. Except the insurance adjuster, who arrived the following day, delivered another blow to the already battered board. "The policy explicitly excludes coverage for unauthorized construction," he explained, reviewing the documentation in my living room while Martha and two other board members sat uncomfortably on my sofa. "Building on private property without proper easements or permission constitutes unauthorized construction. The HOA members will be personally liable for all damages and fines." Martha's face drained of color. "That is impossible. We were assured by legal counsel that our actions were covered." "Perhaps you should speak with that counsel about their erroneous advice," the adjuster replied coolly. "My determination is final." The criminal investigations began next. Martha's brother-in-law, Commissioner Davis, suddenly remembered urgent business overseas, his departure so hasty he left personal items in his office. The County Ethics Committee opened an investigation into permit fraud and abuse of power. The Environmental Crimes Unit calculated damages to the protected salamander habitat in the creek. Their lawsuit against me dissolved when my documentation proved I had warned them repeatedly about the structural dangers. My counterclaim for property damage and trespassing, however, gained immediate traction with the judge assigned to the case. The emergency HOA meeting, held 2 weeks after the collapse, was open to all residents of Creekside Estates. I attended as an observer, sitting quietly in the back as homeowners expressed their outrage. "Our property values are plummeting because of this fiasco," one woman complained. "My homeowner's insurance is threatening to cancel my policy," added another. "Where did our dues go if not for proper construction?" demanded a third. The vote to remove the entire board was unanimous. Martha resigned before they could formally dismiss her. The new board approached me with respectful distance and formal apologies at their first official meeting. "We would like to restore your property to its original condition," the new president, Alina Rodriguez, stated sincerely. "At our expense, naturally. And we want to formally acknowledge your property boundaries with legally binding documents." As spring arrived, I watched environmental crews restore my creek bank, removing the last concrete scars of the failed bridge. Native plants replace the trampled vegetation. The water flows unobstructed now, clearer somehow for having witnessed justice. Thomas Wilkins stopped by one afternoon as I sat by the creek. He had lost his position as treasurer, but gained something more valuable. "I wanted to thank you," he said, hands in pockets, eyes on the flowing water. "If that bridge had collapsed with children on it—" He shook his head, unable to finish the thought. "You did not need to come all this way to thank me for doing what anyone should have done," I replied. He smiled ruefully. "But no one else did they? Everyone went along with Martha because it was easier than standing up to her. You stood alone and took all the abuse." "Not entirely alone," I corrected him. "Physics was on my side. Some nights I sit by the creek banks, listening to its gentle wisdom, that nature, time, and truth eventually wash away all that is built on deception. The water flows freely now, uninterrupted by human arrogance. The frogs have returned, their evening chorus a reminder that some boundaries exist for good reasons." Martha Kellerman moved away shortly after the criminal charges were filed. I heard she relocated to another upscale community several states away. I sometimes wonder if she learned anything from the experience, or if she is already scanning property maps, looking for new boundaries to violate. As for me, I have become somewhat of a local celebrity, the person who stood up to corruption and won. People ask how I found the courage to stand alone against such powerful forces. I tell them it was never about courage. It was about knowing what was right and refusing to be moved, like the boundary stones my grandfather placed along the creek so many years ago. In the end, justice arrived not through courtrooms or lawyers, though they played their part. Justice arrived through the simple, unavoidable laws of physics. A bridge built on deception could not stand, no matter how many permits were signed or how many officials looked the other way. The creek still marks my boundary line, flowing exactly as it has for generations. Only now it carries a story, a reminder that some things cannot be bought, bullied, or bridged without consequence.